The FAI story is on the front page of the Sunday Times. It's worth just touching on. I know, Gary, you suspect there's a bit of FAI fatigue out there, and I'm starting to detect it myself. It's definitely slowing down in terms of excitement levels. The situation at the moment, if you were to sum it up, and it's on the front page here of the Sunday Times, and there's a piece in the Mail on Sunday about it on page 71 there, is that a set of recommendations have been put forward, and they include the schoolboy seat at the board of the FAI being shared, so not being an automatic full-time seat at the board. And so the chairman of the schoolboys FAI, John Early, has resigned. He resigned on Wednesday over the plans to abolish their automatic right to a seat. This is following Aidan Horan of the Institute for Public Administration. He headed up a review group, so they've put forward a load of recommendations which the FAI want to try and accept in full. You suspect really just to try and smooth everything over as quickly as possible. One of those recommendations is that the schoolboy seat wouldn't be an automatic, and John Early has resigned. He says, I'm very disappointed when Aidan Horan, who's head up this review committee, addressed the board and told us we were all culpable for what had happened. This is Early speaking yesterday, the schoolboy representative speaking yesterday. I don't think that schoolboy football has any culpability. If John Delaney made a £100,000 loan and we never even knew who signed off on that, I wasn't aware of it. I was never told who said afterwards that I was aware of it. I'm still very unhappy. So it seems what's going to happen here is that there's going to be the AGM, and the FAI want to push through the recommendation, but certainly they won't have the support of the schoolboy votes, which are sizable. That's the general gist here.
Yeah, like, I mean, if anyone thinks, firstly, that this story is going to fade into the background, they're off their heads. This is going to go on, I'd say, for another couple of years.
Yeah, that's my worry.
Yeah.
We're into a saga here.
The fatigue element, it's funny, like Paul Rowan and Philip Quinn, the two guys that we're referencing here, they're dogged. The FAI aren't going to get away with anything without those two guys making sure that everything's above board. They're not shy about asking the hard question. In terms of the level of fatigue, people...
Were sports journalists a bit... it was striking it was Mark Tye who made the breakthrough.
Yeah.
So point being, shouldn't a sports journalist have led that charge over the previous decade?
Have you not been reading the papers in the previous decade?
Yeah.
Okay, well, in 2010, I wrote a piece saying it's time for John Delaney to go for the News of the World.
Yeah.
I got the sum total of the reaction to that piece were 2 letters from schoolboy clubs saying how great it to my, not to me, but to my sports editor, how in God's name they knew who my sports editor was remarkable. I have no idea how they found out. And the point that they were making was, this is rubbish journalism. You can't be allowing this to happen. There was zero reaction otherwise. Nobody cared. None of the politicians that have been jumping up and down, waving their hands.
Oh, well, that's just opportunism.
Exactly, you know, that's
blatant.
My point.
Yeah. But so, in terms of almost the smoking gun or the evidence, I guess, or the story like the £100,000 loan or the other bits and pieces, do you think there's an argument that actually over the past 10 years...
Joe, nobody has been shy. Absolutely no...
Everyone's critiqued him and his behaviour, but in terms of actually getting the story to...
That's good journalism on Mark's behalf. And also, there's a couple of guys in The Sun who aren't getting to see him plaudits.
No, that's true.
Neil Cotter's work on this story has been exceptional, and he continues to get story after story. Even, like, I mean, the fatigue element that's kicked in with the reader. Yeah. Neil has been knocking on the door, hasn't been shy at all about asking the hard question and doing the graft to get really good stories. Sometimes you just get lucky. I'm sorry, I don't mean to dismiss Mark's work as luck.
I know what you mean.
But like Paul Rowan has been dogged after Delaney since 2005. And I wouldn't say there's one football reporter on the beat that hasn't asked serious questions of John Delaney and the FAI, and are continuing to ask serious questions. So, fair play to Mark for getting it, but you know, who got the winning goal for Portugal in the Euro 2016 final? That doesn't mean that Ronaldo wasn't a key reason for their victory as well. Like,
Fair point,
if Paul hadn't have, actually I forget the name of who got the goal in 2016. I know he played for Swansea on loan for a bit. Like,
was it Elber, something like that? It's a left-footed strike from distance.
I can picture the goal, but my point being that if the climate hadn't have been there, would the editors have encouraged Mark Tagg to go hunting for that story?
Fair point. Yeah,
so,
it's a fair point.
And there were a lot of times when journalists were told by their editors, back off now, we're worried about the legalities of this situation. The readers aren't interested in the story, so let it go. And it's to the credit of Rowan and Quinner and Paul Lennon and Emmett Malone and Dan McDonnell, absolutely every one of us. Again, I'm leaving names out here, apologies to them. They never let up. You know.
Yeah.
If anybody let up, I disappeared for 5 or 6 years from the story, which I'm embarrassed about. You know. I wasn't shy at one stage about having to go, and then it didn't do much. So I'm not going to criticise any other colleagues for the fact that Mark got the story. Fair play to him for getting it, but plenty of credit should be shared around to the other chaps in the press box.
It's a good answer. Why did you go away from it for those years? All of the above reasons?
I can't remember. I got bored. Do you know something? Like we were talking earlier before we came on air, I find administrative stories seriously boring. And even though this is a really important issue, and I've never once gone to, like when I was growing up, I didn't want to watch an FAI council meeting or an FAI AGM. Do you know one sports fan that does?
No, it's not why you get into the business.
It's not why you get. I couldn't care. I hope. Now listen, I've strong views on it. I think the entire board should go. I think quite a few others should go as well. I'm extremely angry as a football fan that Brian Kerr has been dumped out of Irish football and Owen Hand. I can't understand why Pat Fenlon and Trevor Crawley aren't involved. I'm really annoyed that football is run the way it is run in this country. For somebody who is a fan and also somebody that got involved with at coaching and being secretary of a couple of clubs. So there are brilliant administrators in this country, but they tend to stay underneath the radar and away from it. So the boys are doing us a service, but
for sticking on it.
Well, in terms of how it reads, like, you know, it's you know.
I don't think fatigue should be allowed to develop in this, Joe. I think that's a very dangerous position for journalists to allow happen. I think that this is a huge issue for this country. I think that it takes courage to stay with the story now, because what looks like, you know, if you take the front page that we talked about, Paul Rowan, is that, you know, the FAI are going to, you know, take this report and implement it fully if they can get the numbers, obviously, when the AGM comes around in July, in that sense. And that doesn't mean that this report is the right way forward either. It just means that these group of people have decided that, you know, in light of the current situation, this is the way forward. And if you take the schoolboys being ousted, as is commented on here in that sense, that to me would not be a good thing for, you know, for any organisation to have no participation by such a key
on the board. But it
but
seems they'll have to share their seat in the board, which they're unhappy with.
Yeah, but I think that, you know, in the sense of this story, we're now at a stage where, you know, this could easily just get whitewashed, and, you know, John Delaney, you know, his role, his current role, whether that will be maintained or will just part of employment issue going forward.
Yeah.
But the reality here is that, you know, there's been a lack of governance, okay, in the FAI, you know, for whatever reasons, okay, for ineptitude, inability to act as directors, inexperience, volunteerism, whatever. There's a whole lot of things. And I think right now, you know, this is the biggest sport in the country. I mean, you know, more people play soccer than any other sport in this country. We can't afford, you know, to have an association of this magnitude not corrected. And, you know, we're now in a political minefield. You know, you have ministers coming out now and saying, you know, oh, it's great, they'll implement the report and it'll all be lovely and rosy. It really won't. This really needs to be, you know, front and centre of every journalist's mindset, in my view. And the fact that there's fatigue, in my experience, fatigue comes from two things. First of all, the reader gets fatigued most times because the writers stop putting it out with the same interest in that sense. And then the writers get fatigued because their editors or the political minefield, it gets too tough. I would encourage all journalists who are around the story to stay with the courage.
I don't think you've anything to worry about knowing these chaps.
Yeah, well, Paul Rowan's saying, so for these recommendations to be implemented that the review committee has come up with, they need a 2/3 majority at the AGM.
Yep.
So that's 140 out of 206 attendees.
Yep.
Already, the schoolboys have 36 votes, and it looks like they're going to go the other way because they don't want to lose their seat. So they are not signing up in favour of this. Paul Rowan suggests that the FAI want to get this whole report through. Like, they've taken every single recommendation, almost as a preemptive strike, he says, by those curious bedfellows of the FAI and Sport Ireland, aimed at taking some of the sting out of the damning series of reports which are coming their way over the next few months. He says even if that's the case, Paul Rowan, he's looked at the report and there's lots of good things in the report. So independent directors, a chairperson, all to be welcomed. He talks about a series of checks and balances which seem never-ending and appear to raise the spectre of much red tape. So he's saying in Rowan's piece that the report is actually good, although there's a real element within the FAI of trying to get this report through in its entirety because they know there's some bad stuff coming down the line, and it's much easier to say when that bad stuff comes down the line, well look, we've put in all these recommendations, we've already cleaned up the house a little bit. So that's a little bit of what's going on. The opener to Philip Quinn's piece is great actually, because he says time has stood still in Abbottstown for way too long. The meeting room where Donald Conway, the FAI president, and Aidan Horn, the chairperson of this review group, briefed Sunday journalists. He says the clock was broken on the wall and the framed photo of the Republic of Ireland squad with Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane was taken in 2015. The little details, as Giovanni Trapattoni used to say, may be relatively minor in the great scheme of Irish football, but they are a telltale sign of an organisation that's taken its eye off the ball. It's kind of a nice colourful image or start to that piece. He's saying similar things to Paul Rowan about the fact that the schoolboy people now are going to vote against this the full report being implemented. So it remains to be seen where that goes.
And I think in any report there's going to be a lot of very good points. There's no doubts in that. But if the report is going to be pushed in to stop some of the bad stuff coming on the line, that's a real risk. That's a real risk for any organisation in that sense. My guidance would be, if I was involved, would be, let's get the bad stuff out. Like, we need to deal with this. If we want to really clean this up, like, we've got to take the bad stuff or whatever stuff is, is coming on the line, and make it happen quicker. Because, I thought for me, it was interesting that there was no questions allowed, for any of the employees or ex-employees or current employees, which I thought was interesting because that's where the public interest has stemmed from in this whole situation about this 100,000 loan and then other aspects of this chief executive's benefits or perceived benefits in that sense. So what they're trying to do is whitewash all that for the moment, bring this in. The problem bringing it in is they don't have the schoolboys on board, and 36 votes is a lot of votes that they don't have in that sense. And then, hopefully at a point in time in the future, we'll say, well, now we've dealt with all the other stuff, and it's great, and but we've cleaned up the whole place, and you need to deal with the wounds first, and then deal with the wounds, and then from the wounds, lift up from the ashes. But right now, the FAI, has a long way to go, and Gary mentions, some people like Brian Kerr and other people but there's a really awful lot of very good people working in soccer. At all levels of administration.
And they're good people working within the FAI as well.
And the FAI. And I just think the sad thing is that they get all caught up in this, and they lose their motivation. If I was working, with a group about, setting a new vision, you have to get buy-in. You have to get buy-in for a vision. And right now, this new plan seems to have, other than political buy-in, which is expediency, so they can get back funding. Because I think Fergus O'Dowd made a point in Paul Rowan's, is that will bring the sport back into the right territory, transparent, accountable, and getting their funding back. It's more than about that. It's more just funding is important, but if this is really meant to be a let's fix it properly,
genuine way,
it needs to be more than that.